Well, the Women's Champions League kicks off on Tuesday night. For fans across Europe, you can catch all 75 matches in this season's competition on Disney+. Sam is still with us. Thanks, Sam. And we're joined by Emily Keogh to talk about the tournament and the new look format. Can I start with you first, Emily? Just in terms of the format, a bit of a new look, a league phase mirroring the men's competition. Are you in favour? Are you expecting that to be a good thing for this competition?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about it. I think we saw it work really well on the men's side, and we haven't for a really long time had big clashes at the start of the group stage. You know, you could kind of predict how the group's going to look the past couple of seasons. So it's really exciting that we've got big games early on. We've got repeats of last year's semi-finals in the opening games. And that's so exciting that we're actually getting a bit more of that intensity early on. Because I think it did get a little bit repetitive and a little bit boring the past couple of seasons. So I am really excited about it. And I think it throws up a lot of different stories and narratives for every single team. But it's just exciting for the fans of the clubs and of neutrals that early on you've got these big games coming, and it's exciting for everyone, I think.
And Sam, I mean, I know there's been a bit of debate about the changing format for the men's competition, whether people think that it's worked or not. The women's competition is going to be 18 teams, obviously one single league phase. Are you broadly in favour of that change as well?
Yeah, it's hard to say completely until we see it, but obviously, like you say, we've got the experience of seeing how it panned out with the men's competition last year. I think it's good for the women's competition because it expands the competition slightly. It brings in 2 more teams, which can only be good for, you know, the smaller teams getting exposure to playing against some of the biggest teams in Europe. And also it opens up the field a little bit in terms of that knockout round. Obviously, instead of 8 teams going through, you get 12, and then you get that slightly more even knockout round, which we presume will be, you know, some good ties, because we won't be seeing sort of perhaps the middle teams going up against, you know, Barcelona or Chelsea, but competing against each other, which should be exciting. We spoke to Aitana Bonmati last week after she got the Ballon d'Or for the 3rd consecutive year, and she said she's really excited and thinks it'll be really good for the women's game. So we hope so. Yeah, it's promising. Like Emily says, we open with some huge games this week: Lyon against Arsenal, Barcelona against Bayern Munich. Sometimes think perhaps UEFA fix those fixtures a little bit to hook us from the first round. We'll certainly get it in the men's competition as well.
You just mentioned Arsenal there, Sam. Just Emily then. Obviously, the holders not started the WSL particularly well. Are you expecting them to make another run up? Could we possibly see back-to-back wins for Arsenal, or is that a bit too much, do you think?
I think it's going to be a really big ask of them. Like you said, they haven't had a good start to this season. They've dropped 7 points in the league already, and we're only 5 games deep. So there's been a lot of adjustment. I think this was meant to be the big season that they really proved they could compete domestically. They've been 6 years without a WSL title. And so a lot of focus was on trying to regain some of that dominance in England. And that's not worked out well for them. But obviously last year they had a really slow start and then picked up massively in the Champions League and won it. So it is really early to see how they're going to do. I do think, you know, they say that the hardest bit is staying at the top once you've got there. And I think other teams are really coming for them this season. So it's going to be really tough for them. I would love to say that we'll see them in the final, but I don't think they'll quite get there this season. I think they'll kick on until the quarterfinals, semi-finals, but I do think getting to another consecutive final is going to be a big ask for them. And I don't think they've got everything ready and set at the minute to get them there. I think had they had a better start to this season so far, it might be a slightly different story of what I'd be saying to you now, but right now, I just don't see it that they're going to get to that final with how they're playing, and a lot of the gaps, a lot of the issues that they're having. They're creating their own issues. You know, they're the architects of their own problems these past few games, and you know, against teams like Lyon, then that's not going to cut it. So I do think it's going to be a bit too much of an ask for them to get to a consecutive final this season.
And Sam, you know, obviously Arsenal beat Barcelona in the final last season. They've reached 5 straight finals. I know there's been a lot of talk about the cost cutting at Barcelona in general, and you know, across the women's team as well. Are Barcelona still as strong as they always were, or maybe are we seeing perhaps a little dip in terms of the strength of their overall squad?
Yeah, we have to be careful when we speak about Barcelona, because like you say, and I've fed into this as well, because it is true there's been a lot of cost cutting across the club, but that's fed into the women's team this year, and we have seen sort of big departures in terms of, you know, perhaps Fridolina Rolfo was perhaps the biggest surprise. You know, perhaps, you know, youngsters like, you know, Jana Hernandez wasn't expected to leave because expected to be in a part of the club moving forward. But we haven't seen any top talent go. You know, their team is still as strong as it's ever been. They've got good youngsters coming through. So what they've done is they've stripped the depth out a little bit. But, you know, in terms of the 11, they're still really strong. They've added Laia Legendre in defence to compete with Mapi Leon and Lai Alexandre. And then, like we've seen with the men's team at Barcelona in recent years, it's always become sort of an opportunity. And already early on in this season, we've seen sort of youngsters coming through. We've seen Clara Jordi, a young midfielder, sort of come into the team. She scored at the weekend. And we've also got sort of a batch of players who were perhaps not getting as many minutes as they could have done in recent years because of the depth, who now have the chance to get those minutes, or certainly to kick on sort of young players. If you look at sort of, you know, I might sound stupid here because I'm talking about someone who's finished third in the Ballon d'Or, but Salma Parayuelo, for example, she still needs to sort of really sort of claim her place in this team and kick on. Claudia Pina, we did see her sort of come in and claim her place last season, but she's another one who now needs to sort of be consistent and carry that on to this season. Kika Nazareth, who obviously signed the summer before, injury sort of ruled her out at the end of last season. She's another one who's perhaps not started this Barca side as much as she could, but will want to this season. So we've got players who are sort of ready to sort of step in and, you know, take on the baton from, you know, Alexia Putellas, Graham Hansen, Aitana Bonmati, the players that we've seen over recent years. And they're still, you know, on paper, the best team, probably along with Lyon, just ahead of Chelsea for me in the competition. But the worry is, without that depth, how they will be, you know, come the knockout stages, come March, April time.
Well, another one of the big four, Emily, and back to the WSL with Chelsea, obviously dominant domestically, no final though in the Champions League since 2021. Is there a particular reason why you don't think Chelsea have managed to get over the line in Europe?
I think last season was the season we all thought they were going to get there, and then everything just fell apart for them in that semi-final. Sonia Bonpastor, probably for the first time since she joined Chelsea last summer, got her tactics wrong. They really just didn't know what to do, and then they didn't make the right changes in that second leg. And it was a complete demolition job by Barcelona. And it was really disappointing because, like we say, you know, they built such an incredible squad. They have so much depth. You know, if we're talking depth now, Barcelona have slightly slimmed down their squad. You know, they've probably got one of the best looking squads on paper, but something isn't clicking for them. And we've seen it even now that, you know, they bought in Kira Walsh, which was a great signing, but it's not really working for them in midfield. They've got the same issues that they had last season. And it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what's going wrong. I think had they got their tactics right last year in the semi-final, they probably would have made that final. And again, like we say now, I don't know really whether they're going to kick on. It's quite a difficult place to be for them because on paper, everything looks like it could be Chelsea's year, but then they're not the most convincing team at the minute to watch. And there's something in that, you know, you don't have to play the prettiest football if you're winning games, but against a team like Barcelona early on, you know, when you're getting down to the knockouts, that something has to start clicking for them, and it's not at the minute. I would love to say as a Chelsea fan that they could get there, but I always have that little bit of reservation that something's not working, and potentially, and we've seen that with Arsenal, they can't compete in the WSL, but they compete in Europe, that potentially just competing in the WSL and the Champions League at the minute simultaneously is just not possible. The competition is so high in both areas that potentially we're just seeing teams that can't rotate enough. But you would think with the squad they've got, the depth they've built and the tactics they are starting to develop a little bit more under Sonia, and with a bit more time now with her leadership, that hopefully that will be the season. This will be the season they'll get to the final, but there's always that little bit of something that they'll get to that semi-final and potentially the wheels will fall off again. So it's a really hard thing to call, and I just, part of me just doesn't want to say, yeah, they'll get there, this is the season, because it hasn't been for a few years. So it's really hard, and I do think something needs to give if they're going to make it, and I don't know what that is.
How big is it for them that Sam Kerr is back? Obviously been missing for a long time now. It's massive that she's back.
Yeah, it's huge for them. Like I was saying before, you know, they haven't played the prettiest football. They've had to, you know, 10 of their 19 wins last season in the league were 1-goal margins, and you think, what's missing? And obviously Sam Kerr wasn't there. And she was the person that was finishing games. She was really, really important for them the past few seasons. So it's basically like having a new signing back, essentially. She's been out for 22 months. So it's basically like you've got a whole other player coming back in, and it's so exciting for the team. And I think it's such an important place for Sonia to have an extra player up front where they haven't got Moira Ramirez until the start of next year, possibly even longer. So it's going to be really important. And she's got enough time to build up that game time. Obviously, being away for nearly 2 years is a long time not to play football, and they can't rush her back. It's really important that it's a progressive, slow reintroduction to football for her. But there's enough time between now and hopefully if they get into the knockouts between then to really build up her minutes and really get her confidence back. And I think that is going to be really important for Chelsea, is how they reintegrate Sam Kerr, how they use her, and then how fit she's going to be towards the back end of the competition, and when she can really make a difference. And that's going to be when Chelsea really need her.
Sam, just back to you then to round out the kind of the big four. Lyon, obviously, you know, huge European pedigree. Are we expecting them as well to be realistic challengers? Going for a 9th title, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated to see how Lyon do this season. And this is the big narrative for me, really, in the Champions League, because obviously they're under new management in Jonathan Heraldes, who was obviously the Barcelona coach, who, for me, obviously took on a successful Barcelona team, but he really took them to another level in terms of how they played football, which they sort of struggled to reach again last year under Pere Romeu. And he's now the Lyon coach, which has sort of caught Barca by surprise. Obviously, he left Barca sort of 18 months ago, was it now, for Washington Spirit, obviously part of the same group as Lyon, and they were surprised that he was coming back to Europe so quickly with Lyon. So there's a little bit of sort of morbo, as they say in Spanish football, a bit of sort of added rivalry, added heat to that sort of Barca-Lyon sort of dynamic, which has been sort of one of the overriding narratives of this competition in recent years anyway. Obviously, with Lyon winning so many in a row, Barcelona then coming along and trying to sort of take the crown from them as the queens of Europe. Perhaps you could argue taking it from them over the last couple of years, finally beating them in a final in Bilbao. And now they're going to come up against their old coach, Heraldes, if they do meet later in the competition. I think that's going to be fascinating. And obviously what Emily said, I think when you look at that Chelsea squad, so much depth. I think Lyon as well, the amount of players they've added in the summer, the sort of quality they've got at their disposal, the sort of, in comparison to Barca, it's sort of light and dark in terms of their activity in the summer. So it's going to be really, really fascinating. They've got so much depth, so much quality. They've obviously picked off players from some of the other best teams in Europe, with Katoto coming from Paris Saint-Germain, an incredible goal scorer. Jules Brandt, obviously coming from Wolfsburg, one of the stronger German sides. Even Ingrid Engen, who was perhaps sort of a squad player, but a really useful player at Barca, running down her contract and going to Lyon as well, back with her old coach. It's going to be really, really fascinating to see if Heraldes can get sort of Lyon playing that way he had Barca playing, and then especially if they meet them later in the tournament in semi-final or final or whatnot, I think it could be explosive with all those sort of themes under running.
Then just one WSL team that we've not mentioned yet, Man United, obviously making their debut in the competition proper. Emily, what are we expecting from them? Obviously, there's quite a significant reunion with Mary Earps coming back as well with PSG. What kind of reception are you expecting that she might get?
I mean, if we know Man United fans, they're gonna boo her. They boo Alessia Russo every time Arsenal go back there. They're gonna boo her. And I think, it was a really interesting time at Man United a couple of seasons ago. They had a massive exodus over 2 years where so many of their top talent went, like Earps. And because she went on as a free agent, and because she didn't leave in the best of terms of the club, her statement when she left kind of talked about how the direction of the club didn't align with what she wanted anymore, and she wanted to win big, and the club weren't there at the time. You would kind of expect it not to be the best of receptions. However, she's a fan favourite, and people love Mary Earps regardless of the club she plays with. So there are going to be people there that are going to be cheering for her. And it is going to be really interesting seeing her come back, because she hasn't had the best start in the league. She conceded 6 against Lyon recently. So coming back to Man United is going to be a little bit difficult. I do think that the game being at Old Trafford is probably going to be slightly helpful for her, because she's not going back to Leigh Sports Village, which, is quite a hostile place to go. Man United fans are incredibly vocal. They're incredibly loud. They're one of the best fan bases that we've got in women's football. But that's probably going to be a little bit more of a benefit for her, that she's not facing that hostile environment at Leigh Sports Village. But Man United is such an interesting team, because on paper they are really competitive. They have a really good record, really good defensive record, but it's their first crack at this competition, and they have a really thin squad. We've mentioned it with Barcelona, but Man United at times already this season have only had 5 outfield subs. And that's not a place you want to be when you're trying to compete in the Champions League and the WSL at the same time. And they're having consistent injuries coming up to some of their key players. So it's going to be a really tough ask for them, I think, in this period, especially in their introduction to continental football. But I think both Sam and I had them to finish somewhat in the playoffs in our predictions. And you would think that they're probably kind of at that sort of middle pack where they're slightly better than some of the teams. They've got the development than some of the other teams in some of the other countries, but they're probably not. You haven't got enough confidence in them to really kick on to knockouts and say they're going to be surely there. But, if they can keep their squad fit until Christmas, I think they have a really good chance at getting into those playoffs. And then it's anyone's game, really.
I mean, just on United, and from a personal point of view, having covered the men's team for so long, I would really like Sir Jim Radcliffe to turn up to one of these games and show his support. I think it was quite a bad look, really, that he missed both those FA Cup finals. It seems such a small thing for him just to turn up and sit in the stands. Presumably, Emily, you would quite like for him to show that kind of support, and be present at one of these games at least.
100%. I think it's been really disappointing that we haven't seen Ratcliffe get behind the women's team, especially when, the most recent FA Cup final, they actually moved the men's game to the Friday, to allow people to be able to be at both games and then for him still not to show up. I think it's a really bad look, and it is really disappointing when you've got a really important team and you've got such an exciting team. There's a lot of way for Man United to go to be kind of in the same breadth as Chelsea and Arsenal. They haven't got the history and they haven't got the sort of money that they have yet, but they're such an exciting team and they have played incredibly well the past couple of seasons. So it is really disappointing that we've just not seen that support. And I think, when we speak to Mark Skinner, he's always very positive about the management, but the optics of it is really, really bad. And I think it's the sort of thing that you really want to be able to get behind the team and support them in those games, and for your kind of senior management within the club to not be doing that. You have to think kind of as a player and as people around the club that, what is going on here? What more can we be doing to really get that support? And it is disappointing. And I think, there's going to be a lot more questions asked of Ratcliffe if they don't show up to any of the Champions League games, the same way that we asked the same questions with the FA Cup finals and some of the big league games as well, and they at some point have to give an answer as to why they're consistently not showing up for the women's team. And it is just overall disappointing that we're 2 years in and still haven't really seen that sort of big support that we've seen other owners and other management giving to other clubs. So I think, it's going to be a really interesting period for the club as a whole over the next couple of months.
Well, on to predictions then. I've read both of your predictions. Both of you have got the same top four with Barca, Lyon, Chelsea and Arsenal in your top four. Sam, we'll start with you first. Are you expecting the winner to come from that group? Are we going to see any kind of major shocks with that top four, do you think?
I mean, any prediction of a shock is you're just sort of grabbing something from thin air. Obviously, Arsenal would have been considered a shock last year. I don't think anyone, even before this, even when they got to the semi-finals with, Lyon and then a final against possible Barcelona or Chelsea, would have predicted them to win it. So it can happen, which is, I think, a good thing for the competition last year, because it sort of opens up the field, perhaps in terms of, whether it's the German sides, whether it's Arsenal again, whether it's, even Real Madrid, who, listening to Emily talk about Manchester United, there's perhaps a lot of similarities there, and perhaps you want them to kick on a little bit more. But under a new manager, they beat Barcelona for the first time earlier this season. They do invest in players. Obviously, they lost to Arsenal, but they beat Arsenal in the first leg. So I think will be a clutch of teams that now think, look, Barca, Lyon, Chelsea are beatable. Arsenal have shown it, but no, I don't see anyone outside of Barcelona, Lyon, or Chelsea winning it. And like I said, I think Barcelona and Lyon are just ahead of Chelsea for perhaps the reasons Emily said as well. You're just waiting for a little bit of a click from Chelsea. If you're just looking at the squad, you'd probably say Chelsea or Lyon and Barcelona third. But on what we've seen and, the last couple of years, you'd probably put Chelsea just away from those two. I don't think we'll see Arsenal win it again. I don't think, Real Madrid or a German side could win it. But with this new format and, like I said, with Arsenal, who knows?
Emily, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think... a lot of similar points to what Sam said. I think last year, I don't think anyone expected Arsenal to win it. Even Arsenal fans went to Lisbon purely to say that, it was a bit of fun. It was a couple of days holiday. None of them really expected to come away with the trophy. So it is, it's anyone's game at the end of the day, especially when you've kind of got those two legs. Arsenal came back in both of their quarter and semi-finals to get to the final. So, it could be anyone's game. I do agree with Sam that as much as I think Chelsea have everything in their locker, it's just not, they haven't got everything all together and cohesive to really get to that final. But maybe I'll be proven wrong. I do think, like Sam said, Lyon are in a really great shape, and I am really excited to see what they're going to do, especially first game up being Arsenal. They're going to want to really make a statement after how they went out of the competition last season. So I think if they get that right, and they've got a fairly decent draw, you expect a team like Lyon to be able to cope with that. And I think they've got a lot to really build momentum. Like Sam said, but some of the German teams, I think Bayern Munich have one of the hardest draws that you could have gotten in this, playing some of the top teams. And we've seen them be really kind of unpredictable, but in the negative side of that as well, that they haven't really shown a lot of consistency. And I do think it's going to be between Lyon, Barcelona and in that final. And I do think Arsenal and Chelsea will get to the knockouts and get deep into the competition, but I'm just not entirely sure that either of them have enough to be able to get back to that final. But there could be a surprise. There's a few dark horses there. Valerenga have avoided all the top big four teams in the draw, and you would think that a team like that potentially would be in and around the playoffs. But we've seen surprises in this format before, so they're someone that you probably wouldn't want to count out if they can get a few good games under their belt. But there are a few teams in and around that middle section that if they can get some momentum and get a good run of form that and can get through that playoff, that potentially could have some surprises. Roma are one of them that I think people slightly underestimate where they are, but we've seen them have a really good run before. So potentially they'll make it into the knockouts and could kick on and have the Arsenal style fairy tale ending. But it's anyone's game at the minute. And it's just really exciting that it's really tough to call where we are at right now, because past couple of seasons, you've kind of predicted where we're going to end up. So it's exciting that we can't really predict it right now.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks to Emily and to Sam. Remember to watch all the Women's Champions League on Disney Plus this season, and we'll be back with more football reporters next week.